Books are the most powerful medium of knowledge. Brilliant authors have spent countless hours researching, writing, and toiling over years to produce a well-written book. And any one of us can access this wealth of knowledge for most often $20 for a hardcover and $10 for a paperback. If we're really cheap, borrow a copy from our local library for free. Books have transformed my life, and therefore I want to share with you 12 of my favorites in today's video. And just a heads up, the books I'm going to talk about in this video aren't money related. They range from productivity, business, health to life in general, but I won't discuss money or investing books. I have many other videos where I dive deep into these topics, so if you'd like to learn more, I'll have links in the description below. Alright, with that said, let's get right into it. And real quick, if you're new to the channel, my name is Tay from Financial Tortoise, where we learn to grow our wealth slow and steady. The first book that changed my life is Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss. I know what you're thinking. This is a children's book. But for me, it has definitely earned its place on my personal bookshelf. Dr. Seuss wrote and illustrated more than 60 books in his lifetime. There's a good chance many of you grew up reading his many classics. The Cat in the Hat, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and Green Eggs and Ham. I still read them to my kids before bedtime. Oh, the Places You'll Go was the last book Dr. Seuss published before he passed away in 1991. And I'm constantly amazed how much wisdom is packed in such a short book. As someone who's been around the block, I'm awed by each page and how deep it gets in so few words. My favorite page is the waiting room. According to Dr. Seuss, the most useless place, where people are just waiting for a train to go, or a bus to come, or a plane to go, or a mail to come, or the rain to go. Everyone is just waiting. We can live our life where we're just waiting for the right opportunity, perfect time, the ideal scenario. However, that will never come. If we want to make things happen, it happens not because we're waiting and hoping, but because we're moving mountains and taking action. If you're looking for a good book, one that will not only inspire you, but one that you can also read with your kids, I highly recommend this short read. My wife and I love it so much we actually have multiple copies of it around the house so we can easily pick it up and read it whenever we have 5 minutes. The second book that changed my life is a classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. As a first-generation immigrant, it's not an understatement to say that I struggled with making friends growing up. The culture, as well as the language, was so different from what I grew up with. Thus, I came to believe that some people were just better at making friends than I was. Watching Saved by the Bell growing up, I thought guys like Zach were just natural at being popular and making friends. It wasn't until I picked up this book later in college I realized that there was actually a strategy to making friends. A process you can follow and a template I could understand. In this classic book, Dale Carnegie shares 6 ways to make people like you, 12 ways to win people to your way of thinking, and 9 ways to change people without arousing resentment. One of my favorite lessons was this: to be interesting, be interested. I always thought that the most popular people became popular because they were so interesting. They could tell the most fascinating stories about themselves and keep people enthralled. But what this book taught me was that it was actually the other way around. I don't need to be interesting, I just need to be really interested in the other person. Let them know I care enough to listen, ask questions, and listen more. And with genuine authenticity. And before you know it, people consider you the most interesting person they met when all you did was be interested. Alright, but let's say that you never really struggle with making new friends, but are struggling to manage current relationships. Then what? This is where the next book comes in. The third book that changed my life is Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud. We might get really good at building new friends and new relationships. However, the key to maintaining healthy relationships is learning to set healthy boundaries. When we first begin a relationship with someone, it may feel like we have to agree and accept everything in order to be liked. However, as Dr. Henry Cloud would say, true intimacy is only built around the freedom to disagree. Healthy boundaries actually create clear expectations for healthy relationships. It enables each part to understand what is acceptable and what is not. A relationship where one person just reacts to everything the other person requests is not a healthy relationship. That is just borderline abuse. I used to believe that being a good person was being nice to everyone, always saying yes no matter how I felt about the request. But reading this book taught me that saying no was not only actually okay, but crucial to maintaining a healthy relationship. It's easier to accept the burden of other people's problem as ours, in spirit of being generous. However, the key lesson this book taught me was that though we're responsible to that person, we aren't actually responsible for them. So at times, it is not only okay to say no, but essential for a healthy relationship. Because if we don't clarify our boundary to our coworkers, friends, and our spouse, they won't know what is acceptable and what isn't. And people who genuinely love and accept us will not only respect our no, but see that as a way to build a deeper relationship. If you have challenges with saying no, I highly recommend checking this book out. The fourth book that changed my life is on a completely different topic, but it's Burn the Fat, Feed the Muscle by Tom Venuto. This book completely revamped my workout routine and my diet. Up until my 20s, most of my exercise consisted of running, and a lot of running. In the Army, it was normal to go for a 3 to 5 mile run pretty much every morning. Right after formation, the first sergeant would lead the unit for a long run around the base. Not knowing much about dieting and the mechanics of physical fitness, I just did whatever the instructor told me to do. Run 5 miles? Sure thing. Do some sprints? Not a problem. Push-ups? When do I stop? And when it came to my diet, I just ate whatever they fed me in the dining facility. Not surprisingly, soon after I left the military, I started to notice my waistline getting a little tighter and my energy level struggling, because I no longer had a workout routine and a healthy diet. Instead of just going out to run again, I wanted a more systematic approach to my routine. This book taught me the importance of weight training and managing my macronutrients. Now, most of my workout consists of moderate weightlifting, deadlift, squats, and bench. And my diet consists of good allocation of protein, carbs, and fat. Both weight and the macro allocation appropriate for my age and fitness target. Now, I don't consider myself super fit by any measurement, but I am proud of having maintained my weight and my body fat percentage pretty consistent the past 10 years. And even after having gotten into my 40s. This book could be a bit dense since it goes pretty deep into calculating your ideal macronutrients as well as going to specific weightlifting schedule. However, if you're looking for a long-term sustainable guide to managing your workout and diet, I highly recommend this book. The fifth book that changed my life is Deep Work by Cal Newport. According to the author, deep work is a state of peak concentration that lets you learn hard things. Cognitively demanding tasks. You know, the one that we subconsciously procrastinate on because we know it's going to stretch our brain to a part of uncomfortableness? The world that we're living in now and the world of the future will increasingly become more competitive. Our chance of success will come down to our ability to master complicated information and continuously produce quality work. This book really helped me to see the power of deep work and how essential it is to my future success. Without such a framework, we could easily come to believe that learning and mastery is something that just comes with time. You know Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hour rule? The key to achieving true expertise in any skill is simply a matter of practicing for at least 10,000 hours. Well, what isn't emphasized with this 10,000 hour rule is how we practice. It isn't just about sitting down and writing for 10,000 hours if we want to be an excellent writer. It isn't just about singing for 10,000 hours if we want to be a world-renowned singer. Rather, it is about how we practice. We want to rigorously train ourselves through this practice of deep work, challenging ourselves to focus on mentally taxing tasks for a sustained period of time without distraction. This book helped me to understand why it was so important for me to block out daily writing or learning time without distraction, and to sustain it through no matter how frustrated I felt by the challenge of the work. In the line of focus, the sixth book that changed my life is The One Thing by Gary Keller. Gary Keller is a co-founder of Keller Williams Realty. You might have seen one of their signs driving around your neighborhood or near your work. Keller Williams Realty is one of the world's largest real estate companies today. It grew from a single office in Austin, Texas to over 1,000 offices and close to 200,000 agents. And Gary Keller believes that a huge element of his company's success came from the ability to focus on their one thing. This book is essentially a frontal challenge to the concept of multitasking. Essentially, that multitasking is a lie. If we want to make real sustainable progress, it isn't about trying to do as much as possible or as many tasks as possible. Success isn't a game won by whoever does the most. It is actually won by those who can identify and singularly focus on doing the one most important thing. I love his reference to dominoes to emphasize this point. He talks about how while a single domino represents only a small amount of potential energy, the more you line up, the more potential energy you accumulate. Because a single domino is capable of bringing down another domino that is actually 50% larger, when you line up more of them sequentially, the compounding power has the ability to knock down items that are multiple times the size of the first domino. In the same way, getting extraordinary results in life is all about creating that domino effect in our day-to-day, week to week. Every day, line up our biggest priority, our one thing, and whack it until it falls. We do this enough day in and day out, and then we'll start to see extraordinary results. The number 7 book that changed my life is Getting Things Done by David Allen. David Allen is a productivity expert who developed a personal productivity system called, as you can guess, Getting Things Done, or for short, GTD. The basic premise of GTD method rests on the concept of separating knowledge-related tasks into separate buckets. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're walking down the hallway and your colleague from accounting asks you if you could send her that latest presentation you've been working on. What most of us would do is drop what we're doing, get our laptop or phone out, and try to find that presentation so we can send it to her right away. Now, there is nothing wrong with doing this except the fact that it is very inefficient and inconvenient, especially if you're on your way to the bathroom to take care of some business. What the GTD method, a simplified version, would say to do is this. Write that information down into your information collection tool. This could be your notepad or an app on your phone. Essentially, your inbox. Then forget about it and move on with your current priority. Then later in the day, when you're reviewing everything in your inbox, process it. Identify what is a task, a good information to know for the future, or just something to delete. Then schedule a time on your calendar for your tasks. This is where you can write down, email Sally from accounting, PowerPoint slides is something you'll do tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Dave Allen goes into much more in depth to break down his GTD system, but this essentially is a general idea. Instead of reacting to all the information that gets thrown at us, apply a system to manage that information so we're being proactive rather than reactive. The number 8 that book changed my life is A Ride of a Lifetime by Bob Iger. Bob Iger is the current CEO of Walt Disney Company. Though he technically retired in 2021, at the request of the Disney's board of directors, he returned to Disney as a CEO late 2022 following a dismissal of his successor. This book chronicles his journey to becoming the CEO of Disney and how his vision and strategy successfully led the company to achieve some amazing growth. Under Bob Iger's leadership, Disney made some amazing acquisitions such as Pixar, Lucasfilms, Marvel Universe, and 21st Century Fox. Disney's value grew nearly 5 times what it was prior to Bob Iger taking on the role of CEO. Now, you might expect that someone who's accomplished so much might be quite full of himself, thus the need to write a book about his greatness. However, what stood out the most for me while reading this book was Bob Iger's genuine down-to-earth personality and character. He spent most of the time in the book talking about the relationship that he forged through his 45-year career. Not his extraordinary vision or greatness, but rather how those relationships, even the ones he forged when he started as a lowly studio grunt at ABC, shaped him to who he became today. And even with each major acquisition, he would go into amazing depth about the relationship he had with individuals like Steve Jobs and George Lucas versus the mechanics of the transaction. If you want to see a first-person view of how Disney became the company that it is today, this is definitely a must-read. The number 9 book that changed my life is Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull. As an older millennial, I grew up watching Pixar movies. Toy Story and Bug's Life came out when I was in high school. And now as a dad, I recently watched the 4th installment of Toy Story with my kids. So this book was definitely a fascinating read to understand how Pixar's founder, Ed Catmull, shaped the studio to produce such amazing pieces of art. And Ed Catmull's background is quite fascinating. Until I read this book, I had no idea that the man behind Pixar was actually a computer scientist, not a film producer or an animation artist. Early in his life, Catmull found inspiration in Disney movies including Peter Pan and Pinocchio, and wanted to be an animator. However, after finishing high school, he had no idea how to become one. So instead, he chose science as his career, ultimately getting his PhD in computer science from the University of Utah. But still fascinated with animation, he specialized in digital imaging and computer graphics, all which eventually led him to Pixar and his spectacular growth. However, Ed recognized from early on that he wasn't the best storyteller. He loved animation, but he knew what he was good at and what he wasn't. So he brought on John Lasseter, a former animator from Disney, to spearhead the creative side of Pixar. And personally, as someone who doesn't have any creative background or considered himself as someone who is creative, I relate a lot with Ed Catmull. The book is a fascinating read not only into the world of digital animation, but the process of creating quality creative work. If you want to understand how Pixar became the company that it is today, this would be a great read. The number 10 book that changed my life is Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. The book details the author's experience in the 1996 Mount Everest disaster, an event made even more famous by the 2015 film Everest starring Jason Clarke and Jake Gyllenhaal. Considered one of the worst disasters on Everest, 8 climbers were killed and several others were stranded by a storm while descending the summit. I'm not a climber and I have no idea how to even properly climb a Kit's rock climbing wall. However, this book was fascinating because it showed the raw human emotion related to risk. Of the climbers that unfortunately passed away, 2 of them were veteran climbers, Rob Hall and Scott Fisher. Each were leaders of their respective expedition group and both had decades of experience in mountain climbing. However, as the book and the movie showed, they made some unfortunate risky decisions that ultimately led them to their death. Life is all about taking risks. However, knowing when to take them and when not to reflects true wisdom. This book is a fascinating view into the world of elite mountain climbing and the tremendous risks that these climbers take to achieve their goals. Number 11 book that changed my life is When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. At the age of 36, on the verge of completing a decade's worth of training as a neurosurgeon, Paul Kalanithi was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. One day he was a doctor treating dying patients, and the next day he became the patient struggling to live. The book chronicles Kalanthi's journey as he went from a naive medical student to a neurosurgeon at Stanford to finally a patient and a new father confronting his own mortality. He forces anyone reading this book to ask hard questions like, what makes life worth living in the face of death? What does it mean to have a child? To nurture a new life as another one fades away. Paul Kalanithi actually passed away while writing this book. The last few chapters were written by his wife. Every time I'm facing a challenge I struggle to overcome, reading even a paragraph from this book brings a new perspective of appreciation. What is this current struggle when we contrast it against death? Paul was forced to face his mortality at the young age of 36. At the peak of his career when he thought he had the rest of his life to look forward to. If such story doesn't bring some perspective into our lives, I don't know what does. Let's not take our precious life for granted. The number 12 book that changed my life is a true classic, and that is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It was published in 1946, and it describes his experience as a prisoner in Nazi concentration camp during World War II. Between 1942 and 1945, Frankl labored in 4 different camps, including Auschwitz, while his parents, brother, and pregnant wife perished. Already at this point, I wouldn't know how to respond to such suffering, but Viktor Frankl essentially summarized his response with this book. He argues that we cannot avoid suffering, but we can choose how to cope with it. find meaning in it, and move forward with renewed purpose. He saw firsthand how a way a prisoner imagined the future affected their longevity. Prisoners who found a reason to live had a stronger will to live and a chance of coming out alive, while those without a reason to keep going increased their likelihood of illness and death. As the title of the book suggests, pursuit of what we personally find meaningful is what drives life. Not pleasure, not money. This is not an easy book to digest, but it will definitely have a tremendous impact on the way you think about life. Thank you guys for watching in the line of books. If you'd like to learn my favorite personal finance investing books, please check out my video here. Until next time, all the best.